Good afternoon. I'm Bruce Fehn, and welcome to another edition of Teachers Fight Back. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Leah Williams, who is running for school board in Johnston, Iowa, the public schools there, the school board there. And she's in the thick of things in terms of all that's going on in Johnston. We've talked with a student and as well as a parent. And now we get to talk with Leah, who, as I say, is running for school board and has been very involved and active as a volunteer in the Johnston schools. And she ran for school board uh, during the last elections, and she's going to be running again now. So, Leah, you came from North Carolina, and you found your way to Iowa. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll hear from you in terms of the issues going on in Johnston and your run for the school board, past and present. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you first for having me on to talk with you today. My name is Leah Williams, as stated, and I am not spelled the traditional Leah, so I like to introduce that way, spelled Lya. I got my thirst for being an engineer because my mom is a math teacher, and I love science, and I have two uncles, her brothers, who are electrical engineers. And I was gifted opportunity to do a STEM program when I was 16 years old, where I got to stay on campus at my alma mater, North Carolina Agricultural Technical State University. And I got a hand in the different disciplines of civil, mechanical, or electrical. When I decided to attend A&T, I did not know which background I wanted to go in. And at that time in the late early 90s, we knew that the environment was still a concern, and you were often told pick something has a future. And so I learned about agricultural and environmental systems, which is now changed to agriculture and biosystems. So I have a Bachelor of Science in that. After I graduated from college, I had a job in Maryland with the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the agency I worked with is Natural Resources Conservation Service. For people who are older, it used to be called Soil Conservation Service. I spent 2 years there. Being a Black female in engineering, to your surprise, there is not a lot of me in this field. And so I met a lot of challenges, a lot of things I thought was disrespectful towards my education. And I sought a job here and I'm going to say I thought it was Des Moines, but Des Moines, Iowa. And it was with a design team designing dams, flood retarding structures, public law 534. I want to say was one of them. And so that's what got me here to Iowa. And things seemed to take off. It wasn't that I wasn't met with frustration sometimes, having to always defend me being Black uh, versus me trying to do the job. So I think dispelling a lot of views of being a Black woman who is Southern and who is not stupid. And, we attach a lot of stereotypes to Southern people as being slow. I hope I am talking slow enough today because I have a tendency to talk fast. So I'm a fast talking Southerner with East Coast viewpoints, which are not always easily accepted here in the Midwest culture. I would soon learn. So my career takes off. I'm here in Des Moines, Iowa, and I decided to be a mom later in life. And at this particular time, I'm sent to Ottumwa, Iowa. No shade, but Ottumwa, Iowa is not somewhere a Black woman wants to be located. And having the kind of stares and interactions I had, whole nother, gamut. Um, I spent time in Ottumwa from 2008 till about the time I gave birth to my now 10-year-old. And that was the best reason to quit my job and be done. And I never knew my plight in engineering and my advocacy about equity would end there. So when my son was of school age to come here, that's when I was noticing some things I didn't like that I saw going on in our school district. And one of them was my kindergartner did not come home to talk to me about Black history. Never have I ever in my educational arena ever not heard any kid during the month of February talk about Black History Month. And so dumbfounded. I didn't understand that. I did also join like the PTO because as a new kindergarten mom, I'm trying to get the lay of the land. I want to know what's going on. My son's particular school doesn't orientate new parents, but I thought, you know what? I'm a stay at home mom. This is who helped make decisions and who's involved. Let me go that way. And so I lead in about the whole Black History Month because um, I was concerned about that. So as a concerned parent, I bring these issues up, and then I got an opportunity to be on a school improvement advisory committee known as SIAC, and that is an extension of school board. And I kept being in bewilderment. Me, a kindergarten mom, being asked out of all these parents, why did my principal ask me? And I think it came back to I'm outspoken, I'm vocal, right? Nobody ever thought, needless me, that that would lead to wanting to run for school board. So, with that being said, we have a group of students, which is where my connection with Waverly comes in. Waverly Jow, she's a senior at Johnston High School, but when I met her, she was a junior. And prior to her, the students of core had these listed demands right after the George Floyd incident, and they had these demands of the admin, and it was about, hey, curriculum around Black history, curriculum, and hiring more teachers of color, you know, um, dealing when people are using racial slurs, like all of the things that they were finding concerns about. This is what this group was. And that's how I became a parent active in a local group that I'm a part of. And that started that part. And that's when I realized, wow, when you work in a group concerted effort, my quote is, we each got an individual finger, but together it makes a fist. And a fist is so much powerful than an individual finger. And so that's the short version.
Okay, so you found yourself in Johnston. Uh, uh, you made contact with Waverly Zhao and perhaps her mother Monique, both of whom, as I mentioned briefly at the start of things, have been interviewed and appear on our um, website. Be sure and listen to their interviews as well. So you met Waverly, and they, as student activists, really
Yes.
sought you out. Is this a fair way of putting it? In
So
order to, go
the
ahead.
campaign, I think I was trying to give us a lull, so I didn't talk long.
No,
But
no,
in
you just keep rolling
2021,
along.
when I
Hmm.
announced my candidacy, um, the students, I didn't realize it was part of their platform, was to help advocate for people running in positions. And we had did a community event with my local group, and there that was the first time I met her. And then when I announced my candidacy, I was doing a local farmer market here in Johnston, and she and her mom stopped by again. Unbeknownst to me, some kind of way, and I can't, because it's two years ago, but we connected, and she and her fellow students in core door knocked and walked with me. We walked as a group. They helped me, and I told them why, because being a Black woman knocking on doors of white people is not always received, and it's a little nerve wracking because I don't know how I'm going to be received from the other door. And if I can't get my foot in the door to talk to you, because some people just didn't open their doors up, right? Even the students whose makeup is of BIPOC as well, they also were met with that. But it was like a learning lesson. And every week, these students showed up to support me in my campaign. I even got to do little TikToks. We had a trunk or treat at the high school. I got to have my table near them. So because they're not platform, but what they're based upon is advocating, and that was it. And so that was how the initial connection came along with Waverly. And then during my candidacy and my run, we had too many people running on a ticket, and there's a lot of like commentary surrounding it, but we just had too many people on the ticket. And that's when I learned that, when you are a new person, a new face, there is this thing about incumbents that I did not see an issue. But with that being said, us having too many people on the ticket led to us losing some seats. And the more, I guess we say, right wing candidates were able to take over and get on the board. And they used this group that was called the 176 Political Action Committee, a PAC. And on that postcard, they said some very offensive things that I thought was very attacking in nature. And it's like, this is a nonpartisan race, but the tactics were like ugly politics, you know. Because one of our candidates that won came up to Waverly and a couple students at a board meeting and said, I see you, I hear you, but I don't agree with you. When you're met with that kind of stuff, you're learning that that person is not about inclusion or equity and they're finding everything wrong with it. So that was one protest that I didn't lead. It was student led. I more or less am like a community supporter, basically, and someone is like making sure they're safe. So there's connections that were made to like talking to police department, parents in my local group. We talked to like making sure the route was safe, and there was a lot of safety parameters. And we came into the school board meeting to let them know what time it was. And that was probably, it was later. I think I don't remember if that was first or not, but another incident was about book banning, which is a hot topic now in the legislative. And we had a parent named Mandy Gilbert who was upset that there was the Hate You Give and the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And because it had the N words in it, because it says F words in it, they were trying to use these two books to have them ruled out of the Johnson curriculum. The rumor mill is their kid is not even in class, but the facts were every teacher gives them the opportunity to opt their child out and choose a different book. And here are these parents trying to tell every other child. So when I had a chance to speak, because we had a now ex-senator, Jake Chapman, he was at our meeting. We had senators and House representatives in our school board meeting, and one of them wasn't even in our district. But speaking against about how they were going to come out and arrest these teachers. Like, can you imagine working? Well, you said you're a teacher. You're working and people are telling they're going to arrest you over an approved curriculum that went through all these things. And somewhere along the line, some of these parents don't even know they've always had rights. You have a right as a parent to opt your child out at any time. But they have driven the narrative so much, it has made it all the way up to the governor's office. So that was like the second incident after like the unsuccessful run of my first, campaign.
Can
So
we loop?
that's go
Mhm.
ahead.
Well, I just want to loop back a little bit to make sure we flesh out the campaign that you ran,
Okay.
and you made mention of the support you garnered. That there were too many candidates whose views were probably at least somewhat compatible with your own,
Hmm.
um, and then there were tactics used by the individuals who actually won, who took the 1776 pledge
Hmm.
and were supported by this 77-6 action group.
Hmm.
Um, what kind of tactics did they use or employ in order to uh, garner votes? You'd mentioned that some of them were
Well,
unsavory, I guess
see,
you might say, in
if
your
you
view.
look at the numbers, if you go back and look at how many votes I got versus them, their numbers were within 1 or 2 points. So it was very, I was going to say equal distance, but that's not the engineering term, but it was very much relatively close. And on our progressive end of things, we had the most people who voted. But when you go and divide that number up, because I kept saying, the math is not adding up, you have that. And it's not an attack on anybody, but I felt like it deserved a conversation of how do we want to proceed going in the future so we're not losing seats. And if new people are coming in and talking equity, who else better to represent that than, and I'm using me as an example, and at that time, another Black woman who was running as well. Who else better to serve that if that's what we say we're getting behind? So we lose that conversation. The other tactics, as far as the candidate, they just had more money. They had more influence on money, more influence on kind of like what's happening in the board. Um, None of these things ever seemed very concrete. Like even to the fact of, we were masking and dismissing what the Polk County data was. You could just see it all written on the wall. But several times within our district, it has felt with some, not all, but a few of our admin that it was evident that we were the enemy, not as far as a candidate standpoint, but the people who were calling people to the carpet to say, hey, here's a voice that's not being heard, how we're representing it. I would also say there was a few attacks in a sense of, for example, for me, I wanted to take a picture. We had just opened up a brand new Johnston Town Center. And we just Johnson just hired a new community liaison who happens to be a Black man. And I'm out there doing, because it's my first campaign, I'm trying to take pictures. And I was told at that time by the police chief that you could not take pictures with them because of the Hatch Act. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. The only person out here that I'm aware of as a federal employee formerly, that applies to federal employees. And this is a nonpartisan, right? Well, I wasn't able to drive home that argument until later on. I saw two pictures, not one, of one of the candidates who won on the more, you know, I said radical conservative ticket, flanked twice. And at that particular event, one of them, which we might loop back to that, was the kickoff for the Turning Point USA student group that got started in the district.
Yes, I
Um,
want to talk about that.
Everything, it's like an intertwine. So that was one way that happened. Another thing happened is my local parent group, we wanted to do a community event, and it was about having back to school supplies. We was offering free haircuts. Well, when our district admin, and I'm going to say our superintendent, who is now leaving, kept saying that they couldn't do it. And at the time, the communications person that, runs the web, they couldn't share our details. Well, the crew that is, they've made a name for themselves, Moms for Liberty. They had they had their event called Patriots in the Park. It gets shared to the district website. After we had been asking for weeks and weeks and weeks on time, can we please get our event shared? It's school related. And their event was not school related. So for me, and this is disclaimer, this is about me and my candidacy. I'm not speaking on behalf of my local parent group. And they would, by the way, I think at some point, if you would like to interview them, talk with them. But my disclaimer is, in my view of how that went down, it really came across that we were the same group of people, the kids in core were complaining about how they're being treated. So if the students who are well aware of what has happened to them are experiencing, and now I as an adult am experiencing that, how much frustrating. So it only makes sense to find a way to put myself in a position to be able to elevate more, and that's to put myself out there again, because it's very easy to criticize people, but it is very hard to yourself to actually campaign. Campaigning is not, it ain't easy. I mean, it is the most challenging thing of all, because you're basically asking people to like you and support you. You know, it's
It
a hard, it's hard.
certainly is challenging, and I just want to say that the student group at Johnson that formed in order to put on the front burner really issues of diversity, it was called, or is called, the Committee on Racial Equality. So that's a school-based student group who
Right.
stepped out and sought to wanted to work with you and support your candidacy, and were willing to get out there and do the hard work of campaigning side by side with you. And it's interesting to hear you say that the kind of marginalization that you and your supporters felt in terms of conversations, let's say, with the superintendent and other officials or administrators in the school cohered or was compatible with the experience of the students within the school, right? So it's the
Hmm.
same sort of feelings that you experience. So that's an interesting basis of solidarity, kind of a mutual sense of being ignored or something like that, right?
Right.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's so much that's been happening in Johnston, and so much of it involves you. It's hard to know where to begin and where to end in terms of these various chapters of the last couple of years. But I guess we could pick up on the Turning Point USA and that particular situation because I think it connects with the fact that Turning Point USA, which is a right wing organization that sets up chapters in schools and universities throughout the country, they wanted to set up a chapter in Johnston, and they also supported the candidates that ran against you, who ended up uh, being victorious in the election. Derek Tyndall, Deb Davis, and Clint Evans are their names. They were supported by TPUSA, as I understand it, and they also took that 77-6 pledge, um, which originated with Donald Trump toward the end of his campaign, by the way. But
Anti 1619 project by Nicole Hannah Jones. Like all of that
exactly,
stuff
reaction to that.
connects. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Turning Point USA was a point of contention for me because it began them to try to look at core. Everything has always been like the antithesis. And the reason why I'm kind of going back to what our leadership is, what I noticed is that with our superintendent, what I had wanted from her in trying to be supportive was her to choose the side of right, her to choose the side of what made sense. Waverly, as you have seen, and if listeners choose to listen to her podcast, she is a very eloquent and smart young lady. Like and she's doing things in the right way. And what I have noticed that is every time students who are underrepresented follow the rules and then are told, no, you can't do this. But then there's a group who can come in, not follow the rules, and it continues to perpetuate stuff. And I'm not going to use what other people think, oh, now you're trying to call me the R word. I'm not saying that. So with Turning Point USA, they didn't turn in the correct documents. And then it turned into, and on our admin end, oh, my bad, my fault. I didn't give them correct information. So then our school board had no choice, not all of them. So unfortunately, as a school board, no matter if you're the one no in the room, you are still seen as the board as a unit. And that's something I think people don't take the time to realize that as well. However, um, they were allowed to slide in, right? And it kept being this knock on every time Waverly, Anita, let me see, there's Isha. There were several students who would go up to the microphone, and it's not all of them, and talk. They would get discredited with, oh, you guys are not student led. I want to keep in mind for anyone listening, I may have, listened to what they want to say, but I never wrote anything they said. All of it came from them. These kids get treated, honestly, to me, like they're stupid. Like they're not capable of knowing what is what and what is happening. And sometimes the adults in the room are not being the example they need to be to the students. So they kept trying to be an attack towards core, which eventually catapulted Turning Point USA into getting approved. We did have another parent group who tried to go and fight that. But I think some kind of way it was filed that there was nothing wrong, so it stayed. Even though they never turned into bylaws, even though they were, nationally connected to like Charlie Kirk, and what was the shooter I think that was in Wisconsin. Even though things kept getting pointed out, how once you let them into school, that's it. We can't stop anything. What message does that send that these kids of core who already say they don't have a space for themselves or enough support from when things being cause harm? So like in the protest, there were parents in there calling them a circus, very derogatory kind of comments, if that makes any sense. And then you go and say in this predominantly white school district that their white conservative voice is not being heard. So now you need to go get another student club because I mean, I laugh because the engineer in me, I'm black and white. I do not see the connection to make it make any sense, right?
Understood.
Um,
Mhm.
so that kind of is like the tip of where, so you got your book banning, then you get the Turning Point USA, and it's like watching policies that are written, but it's who enforces them and whose interpretation determines what's the correct way. And then, oops, I make a mistake. Oh, and now we hear, oh, it's an implementation and consistency process. And it's like, it's frustrating, you know. Um, my hope and as far as my candidacy and why being on the board is about having that inclusion, making the district demographically look the district is changing. The district is no longer a predominantly white district. We have so many different nationalities. One of the things when we had the equity committee before our director resigned, we were working on how do you make the handbooks in all the languages, since I think at that time maybe like 23 languages, and who is around to help the parents who may not have access to internet. Not everybody has a smartphone, the internet, or a computer, and the assumption that everybody does, that's an inequity happening that we're often overlooked. um but where does it start? And I'm just a firm believer we can collectively sit down and talk to each other if we're respectful enough to hear what each other are saying. And so far, majority of the messages I hear often is, when I've had some conversations, is that there are white people who feel like when we start talking about equity, we're trying to make them feel guilty and that they're oppressed. They've oppressed us. And I'm like, no, nobody ever talks about affirmative action. Affirmative action didn't help all black people. It helped everybody but white males get a foot in the door. But we don't talk about that. You know,
But and you wanted to start the conversation through a diversity committee. Was that appointed by the administration?
so my local parent group, because I'm not a founder of it, created a proposal and it outlined how they wanted things to go. And one of them was to get that position and have it be supported.
A diversity,
So
equity, and inclusion
direct,
position
yes.
funded by the
But
the full time job. For
But
okay,
that but all it was gifted was a position. There was no support system structured underneath it. And most people, if they have that, have at least an assistant. They have a way in doing it, and the expectations within that job never worked. And before the resignation came, it was just always being met with roadblocks over and
yes,
over again.
right. They hired Lewis Fountain, but
Yes.
Mr. Fountain resigned not too long after he took the position, and he resigned. You're saying because he didn't really have the administrative um, tools available
Well,
to
let's
him,
be clear too.
the human
Right.
capital to
My
to support.
disclaimer is this is my point of view. This is not me speaking on behalf of him, which I think he would be a great person to speak with further, but he was battling cancer, bone marrow cancer. And this man was coming to work trying to battle his health issue and trying to manage what was happening. But anytime he was trying to interject and do something, it was being met with a roadblock, right? And when you keep having roadblocks and blocking things, we can't get there. Like, um, I think you had wanted to touch even like with Neil Patel, who eventually resigned as well. He was our only black, well, I shouldn't say black, BIPOC male of color. He's Indian. The only one is teaching science in our district. So my kid wouldn't get to be in his class until he was either eighth or ninth grade. And we all know the first time black kids in general, or even just a person of color, The quicker you come into that, like for me, a lot of people, believe it or not, had never met a black female engineer. And we're in 2023. And my alma mater is full of all nationalities of color graduating with that, right? So if you have a system set up to not even introduce that student, you don't have a way to change your mind. Like my thing back to volunteering at school, sometimes I am the only person in that building who looks like me. Like my son's school just hired their first, to me, that I've seen, black second grade teacher. I would have loved, and people can say that's being, it's not being racist, but when you don't see yourself represented, it is psychological. It's like that Hidden Figures, the movie. Had
Yes.
I known about those women being in NASA, how many more black women might have said, you know what, I can go and do that as well. Um, but with all that saying, the DEI director position was necessary. And then we were wanting to have a survey. It was a whole bunch of like step by step. But what began to happen is we were told it wasn't enough money, right? So you hear that it's not enough funding. Then you see that the position doesn't get supported. And then so there's frustrations. And there was about 7 admin, I think, that left prior before him, kind of total give or take, on top of other staff. I mean, just here recently, they're hiring for every position in the district. I mean, everything has a trickle down effect. What happens at the top of our government is kind of happening lower. And if people are not waking up to realizing their views are helping to destroy their neighborhoods, your school is what drives people to the area. It brings in that community. And when you don't have a great community, nobody want to live here. And it's like, if the goal is to get rid of Iowa, that's where you're heading. Like black, brown, indigenous people of color are not going to disappear off the face of the earth. It's not going to happen. We're here. I just said I have a kid. We're here. That's another conversation for another time. But no one is going. So the conversation always for me is going to go back to the equity. What are we doing to make it equitable for everybody? What is being inclusive to make me feel like I matter and I belong? You know, how are
And
we
those
working this?
and those of course are central goals of your upcoming campaign. How's that going? Or your
My
current campaign, let
campaign,
me say that.
oh my gosh, my current campaign is so awesome. My first time around, I had a campaign consultant. So a lot of stuff was on myself, but this time around, I have a campaign manager and I love it. I love that I have someone that is going to bat for me each and every way, and everything that has been suggested that I do, it has been working out. Um the other part that's going is all of the endorsements I've received so far from community members in our district, as well as the comments like saying, hey, you better support this woman. And even your email and this invitation today, like, you're in Iowa City, you said, but you want to support my campaign. So for me, it feels invigorating. So I hope this time around there's no blame game of people maybe saying people should have dropped out for the greater good. And in my end game is still saying, but if that greater good is not giving me a seat at the table, how does that work? Like for me, if there's not enough room and we're not getting the visibility, we could add more seats on the table. I haven't seen a policy that says school board got to be 7 people, but give the voices a seat at the table when you see it's a problem. Another concern is the math and reading rates. We honestly don't need a survey, but the survey is data driven. People want to look at numbers, but the numbers are there. 50% of all African American and Black students are not meeting the reading or math. Reading and math is significant. Reading, I have learned, is comparable to who gets incarcerated. That is a sad reality.
Most
Where is the tutoring going on, and where is the connection with the parents who may need the help if that's the case? I mean, we've already removed homework coming home because, not quote unquote everybody can help with assignments, right? But when that is being said, that's devastating. And if I can do my part in playing any role in making our district be equitable, um, making sure the students do have a voice, making it a great opportunity for teachers to be able to feel like they can talk and there's not going to be repercussions towards them, um, and making a difference. That's to me what it's all about.
Right. And so, are you knocking on doors?
We are not starting just yet. However, my website is leahwilliams.com, LYAWILLIAMS.com. And it's early on in March. I decided to announce as early as possible so it's very clear how much I am for this. I have stayed very connected in the community because I'm very much for making changes. My door knocking campaign will probably kick off more later, like May or June, as it gets warmed up. And people are going to get sick of me because emails are coming, phone calls are coming, which will be a first. I normally don't do phone
Mm,
banking, but
hmm.
I guess that's just what I got to do if I want
Yes.
to get it in there. So I'll
Hmm.
show again. I worked hard the first time, which is where I'm seeing the payoff now. And
Hmm.
I plan on working just as hard again this time for an
Right.
unpaid job. You know,
Well,
being on the board
uh,
is volunteer.
right. Well, I wish you well in this upcoming campaign. I hope we can talk again. I think there's many more uh, issues and items that I'd like to hear you discuss with respect to Johnston and with respect to developments there inside the schools and with teachers and with Black history and with the silence and chilling of teachers because of legislators' behavior or the behavior of or the legislation that's been like House File 802, for example, which asserts that we cannot talk about divisive concepts or say that there is
Hmm.
systemic racism, which is almost impossible to believe, but that reflects my own biases, I suppose. So, Leah, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go at this point, but I'll be in touch again and hopefully we can have another chat if you're available, okay?
Of course. And thank you again for having me on and giving me this opportunity today.
You're very welcome. Bye for now.
Bye.